Is it the end of me? No, I must still believe. So I'm still alive, you see. Heck yeah, now I'm on my way. But let's stay focused, there's still a job in hand that we must do. Cameras start to click, we know what create is something new. So go, Marty and Sarah and Mark and Matt, Owen, Smitty, McGrilly and Jamie Lane in the Archie County Band. The Archie County Band. The Archie County Band. The Archie County Band. Stop the clock, we're done, we're rolling. Sound the horn and sing that we are going. 27 hours, that is the time. So let's hop on the bus and let it shine, 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 shine. Say sha la 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 la, 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 sha la 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 la. Good evening, folks. You are very welcome to Bandido Talks. Live here on YouTube, 7 p.m. We have episode 12 for you tonight, folks. News on the Tube. Saturday and Sunday live streams. News on the Tube. Of course, we are always live every Friday, every Saturday, and every Sunday here on YouTube at 7 p.m. Last night, we had a great show. I thought it was a really good show last night. Fighting fire with fire. We got through a lot of very interesting... We travelled across some interesting terrain, let's say. We covered a lot about this particular strategy, fighting fire with fire. And that took place, of course, last night on a Friday night. Friday night is always our Let's Reflect segment. So we did some reflecting last night on this strategy, fighting fire with fire. But of course, Friday has come and gone, and now we are arriving at Saturday night, Saturday evening, which can only mean one thing, and that is news on the tube. We've got some news on the tube tonight. So, for those who may not be familiar, what is news on the tube? What is this little Saturday and Sunday night segment that we do here on Bandido Talks? Well, what we do is, in summary, we go down through common, standard media articles and we get in underneath the surface of the headline and see what little lessons await us within this story. What golden nuggets are lying dormant within a particular media article that we can extract from the article and apply to our own existence. That's what we do here on News on the Tube. And we're going to do plenty of that tonight, folks. There will be extractions of lessons made from our various media articles that we are going to delve into this evening. Now, what I will say before we get started, if you enjoy our little News on the Tube segment that we do here every Saturday and Sunday on YouTube at 7 p.m. If you enjoy this segment, then feel free to give it a like. Give the live stream, give the video a like if you find what we do here on a Saturday and Sunday night for our News on the Tube interesting. Of course, if you are joining us live here on YouTube, feel free to get active in the chat. I will promise to read the chat towards the end of tonight's show. We'll get through the bulk of our stories, get all of that covered and discussed, and then I will divert my attention towards our live chat and see if we've got any comments or queries. So feel free to get active in the live chat. It's always good when there's engagement with the show. Last night, of course, the old Bandido, he went over to his live chat. We got through a really good show last night. Covered a lot of interesting things. Feel free, of course, to watch that episode after tonight's show. But we got through all of last night's show. And then I go to the live chat because I'm thinking, well, maybe there may be some comments in the live chat. And of course, what happened? There was nobody in the live chat. No comments were made in the live chat last night. So I went over to the live chat. There was nothing there. So let's see if tonight's live stream, tonight's News on the Tube is going to ignite some discussions within our live chat. If you are watching live, feel free to get active in the live chat. I will, of course, as I've said, be heading over there after we've covered our various stories this evening. Now, if you're watching the live stream after the event, after the live event, that is, then feel free to go down into the comments section. Let me know what you thought about the show. And then, of course, last but not least, if you enjoy what we do here at Bandido Talks, feel free to become a subscriber to the channel. If you find some utility in what it is that we do, if the information is valuable or interesting in some way, feel free to become a subscriber. We will, of course, as I've already said, we do 3 live shows every week, Friday, Saturday and Sunday, 7 p.m. Irish time here on YouTube. And then we always have an upload on Tuesday. That could be with a guest, or it could also be a best bits upload. So plenty of content. We of course have little shorts throughout the week as well. YouTube shorts. The beauty of the short game as well. So there's lots of content coming from Bandido Talks. So feel free to subscribe to the channel if you like what it is that we do here on Bandido Talks. And with all of that out of the way, let us get into tonight's show. So tonight's show, News on the Tube. Some of our more familiar viewers who are familiar with what we do here on News on the Tube. The Bandido's going to go over to his phone. He's going to open up his Google Chrome browser. And of course, what happens when the Bandido opens up his Google Chrome browser? He is assaulted by a whole bunch of media articles. So we're going to go down through as many media articles as we can in the next, let's say 60 odd minutes. See where it takes us. And then we will get into the live chat and then wrap up the show. But let's first and foremost get into our first story. Let's see what the Google Chrome browser of the Bandido is going to chuck his direction and our direction in general. So, let us see what we have on our hands. Now, as always, there can be cookies that need to be accepted. Sometimes I have to subscribe to these articles. But let us see what is going to greet us this evening. So, number one, news article number one. It's from the BBC News. And it's coming from November the 7th. Am I going to be greeted with anything? It looks like we are going to get away without having to accept or subscribe to anything. So, let's read out the title. We'll read out a couple of paragraphs and see what we can extract, what lessons we can extract from this media article. So here is the headline. It goes as follows. Reform school taxi letter used as, quote, political football. So let's read a little bit about this. Reform UK Council leader George Finch has said a letter he sent to the Education Secretary on school taxis in Warwickshire is being used as, quote, a political football. He wrote seeking permission for councils to set their own rules over children's walking distances between home and school to save them money. Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson accused Reform of dragging children, quote, back to the Victorian era. Okay. I think we get the gist of this. So essentially, we have this gentleman, this Reform UK Council leader, George Finch. So he has essentially sent a letter to the Education Secretary on school taxis being used, and he claims this letter is being used as a political football. And the Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, accused Reform in general of dragging children, quote, back to the Victorian era. Okay. And it then says here, Finch, who sat in BBC CWR's hot seat on Friday, said he wrote the letter to get the, quote, best deal for vulnerable children. All right. So, what is the deal here? What is the deal? Essentially, the Education Secretary isn't best happy with Mr. George Finch because she's claiming that this letter that he has sent to the Education Secretary is bringing children back to the Victorian era. I think that's what she said. Back to the Victorian era. So, my assumption, and maybe I'm assuming, maybe this is a wild assumption, and perhaps somebody in the chat or somebody familiar with this story will be able to correct the Bandido. But here's my assumption. I'm guessing that the Education Secretary, who is not happy with George Finch for sending in this letter, she claims that it's dragging children back to the Victorian era. And my assumption is that the problem that she has is that children having to walk to school is a problem. That's what I'm picking up from the article. The general gist is there seems to be the Education Secretary has a problem with children walking to school. Now, I wonder what the problem is. What could the problem be? Is it an abuse of children to have them walk to school? Is this really a problem for them to walk to school? Doing a bit of physical activity? Have we lost touch with our ancestral roots? Because not that long ago, my parents, for example, they had to walk to school every day because it was too expensive for the family to own a car. So back in the day, children used to walk to school all the time. It wasn't a big deal. It wasn't an abuse of their human rights to send the children out to walk to school. They may have had to walk 1 mile, 2 miles, 3 miles to school. And this was not deemed only a few decades ago to be a big deal. So the question that we must ask is, if a big deal is being made about children having to walk to school, and this idea that taxis need to be provided for children who maybe live a few miles away from school, the first thing that I think when I read this kind of article is, not that long ago, it was not uncommon at all for children to walk to school. They would have to walk miles oftentimes, to get to school. So this was not uncommon only a short time ago. So I suppose the question we then must ask ourselves is the following. If it's not an abuse of a child's human rights to have them walk to school and not be taken in a taxi, in this case, to school, if it's not an abuse of their human rights, then what is actually the big problem here? What is the big problem? So perhaps someone watching may say, well, the big problem is that children walking to school now in 2025 in England, let's say, are not safe to walk to school. They aren't safe. Maybe that's the problem. Why is it that we need taxis? Now, the article is hinting the first few paragraphs, and I know I could read the rest of the article. Perhaps the Bandido is getting a little lazy. But the point here is we get the headline, we get the first few paragraphs, and we get our gnashers into the article. So the case in the article, it's been put out there that it's to save money. To save money, perhaps, because it costs money for people to get a taxi. And it seems to be a case here that this reform, Mr. George Finch, it seems, just from the first few paragraphs, and maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like he's advocating that maybe children, who knows, maybe walk to school a little bit more. And he's put this letter forward. Maybe he's trying to make taxis more affordable. I don't know. But what am I really getting from this article? Well, what I'm getting is the following. It was not uncommon, not that long ago, as far back as my parents, just one generation ago, we could say, or a couple of generations ago, it was not uncommon at all. It was the norm, one could argue, to walk to school. So why now is there such a big deal with children walking to school? Why do they need lifts? Why do they need a taxi? Why do they need a car? Why can they not just walk to school? Because walking to school, I think we would all agree, only requires your 2 legs. You only need 2 legs. And even if you don't have legs, there are still ways. You could maybe get a particular type of wheelchair. We see this in sporting events. People are able to get custom-made wheelchairs where they can actually use their own upper body to get from A to B. So even if you don't have legs, you can still go outside and cover substantial distance. So if it's not a big deal to walk to school, and also if we make the argument that actually if more people, because this article seems to be the general dispute between the Education Secretary, from what I can gather, and this Reform MP. Is he an MP? Council leader, George Finch. So the Education Secretary and George Finch, the dispute seems to be with the fact that children having to walk to school, we need to make taxis more affordable because, you know, people are going through tough economic times, it would seem. So again, 2 questions come to my mind when I read the first few paragraphs of this article. Question number 1. Why is it such a big deal for children to walk to school if it's actually cheaper to walk to school? Because if you walk to school, you don't need a car. You don't need to put fuel in that car. You just need to use your legs. Get outside, or your wheelchair if you don't have legs, and then go to your destination of choice, in this case, school. So it's actually cheaper. If you can walk or get outside and make your way to school, that's cheaper. You don't need a taxi. You don't need a car. So why is it such a big deal that our children need taxis and cars? Well, somebody might say, well, our children are very unfit. They're not fit to walk to school. Well, we need to do something about that, one could argue. One could say that's not good enough. Perhaps a little bit of walking into the daily routine may help improve the fitness of these children who are not particularly fit. So we could then throw that out of the equation, because we could actually say walking to school is a good thing for children who are not in good shape, who are unhealthy. So making the excuse and saying, oh, well, my child isn't fit to walk to school because he has a belly, because he's out of shape, that ain't going to fly. Because one could easily make the argument that by walking to school, that's going to help improve the overall fitness and health of that child. It gets them into a better, healthier routine, one could argue. They have to walk to school, they have to walk back from school. So let's rule out this fitness garbage. Somebody's saying, oh no, we need taxis, we need cars because my child isn't fit enough. Bollocks. Part of a healthy routine, it would be good for the child. Get outside, move. First thing in the morning, walk to school, walk back, some exercise, some outdoor time. Good. Okay. So if the actual exercise part of the equation isn't a problem, somebody else then may say, well, hold on. I don't want my child walking to school because I don't think my child is safe. Well, now this is a different question. This is a different angle of attack with regards to this article. Your child not being safe really has nothing to do with, oh, can we lower the price of taxis, or, we need to find ways for children to be able to get to school so that they don't have to walk. And the health secretary is making this remark that we're bringing children back to the Victorian era. Are we really? Getting outside and moving our limbs? We've already talked earlier about the fact that this isn't an abuse of a child's human rights to tell them, get out the door and walk to school. Good. Do some exercise. Get an early win in the day. So the question here isn't, and I can see from this article, it's being phrased. The Education Secretary in the UK is phrasing it as if, how dare you, make our children walk to school. We should be making taxis more affordable. Is this the real problem? Is the real problem that the Health Secretary doesn't want children walking to school because it's an abuse of their physical bodies, them having to walk from home to school? Is that really what the issue is here? I think people watching and listening or reading an article like this, I think if you delve a little deeper in underneath some of the superficial discussion here, there's probably a deeper, more profound reason as to why people in general, parents in general, are a little more apprehensive about their children walking to school. And it comes back to one of the basic human needs, which is physical safety. Physical safety. So think of it from an ancestral point of view. What did physical safety look like for our ancestors? Well, it looked like not getting too cold, not getting too hot, and not getting your arse chewed off by a predator. That's what physical safety looked like. Having a means to stay warm or get out of the heat, and then, yes, to not get gnawed on by some predator and lose your life that way. So physical safety. Perhaps that's the lesson, really, that we learn from this article. We're seeing a lot of back and forth between the Education Secretary and this Reform Councillor about taxis this and, they need to be cheaper and, oh, well, you, Mr. George Finch of Reform, you're bringing us back, you're bringing our children back to the Victorian era by making them walk to school. That's how I'm interpreting the opening of this article. When really, it's not about any of that. It's not about making children walk to school. It's not as if children having to get outside in the morning and walk to school and walk back in the evening. That's not a problem. It's not a problem at all, providing the environment in which they are walking is actually safe. If the environment is not safe, or if the parents of those children deem that the environment in which they are in is not safe, well, now we've got a different question on the table. We have a different issue. So, in this case, I see a lot of dancing around the real issue. If parents feel so apprehensive for their children's safety that they can't even send them out to walk to school, that they need taxis, they need to pay for taxis because maybe these parents are working themselves. They're trying to earn an income to support their families. And maybe they can't afford to be dedicating time on a school run in the morning. Maybe they have to send them on a bus or send them via a taxi. And this perhaps will cost money. If they're going to go via taxi, it will cost money. So why not have the children walk? What's the big deal with walking and doing some exercise? Well, the big deal is if the environment in which the children are walking is not safe. Well, then we're going to have to find an alternative means in order to get our children from point A, which is home, to point B, which is school, and then from point B to point A back again in the afternoon. So the real thing that I take from this story is it seems the fact that children seem unable to walk to school raises an interesting thing, I would say, with our current state of affairs in our society. If parents feel like they can't send their children out to walk, which would be cheaper, we've already talked about this. It's cheaper to send your child out to school walking. That would be easier. It doesn't cost anything. But it seems in this part of England or the UK, wherever it is, the need for taxis. I want to look and see, well, why do we even need taxis? Why do we need this? When only a few decades ago, it was commonplace for children to walk to school. It was commonplace. It wasn't a big deal, in other words. So if the environment in which we are living in is not safe, we must then ask questions as to why the Education Secretary is making it out as if having children walk to school is some abuse of their human rights. We're returning back to the Victorian era. Now, maybe I'm misreading this article, but this is how I view this article when I read it. It seems like the real issue isn't actually being dealt with. And the real issue that I think here is sort of lingering in underneath all of these words from these politicians is our environment. The environment in which our children are walking and playing in is not particularly safe from the perspective of the parents. They don't feel secure or confident enough to send their children out without something happening. That is, I think, the lesson from this article. The lesson is we could infer from what is being discussed here in the first few paragraphs that actually it's nothing to do with exercise, having our children walk to school, do some exercise. Maybe it's more to do with the fact the environment, for some reason, the environment in which we live in 2025 is not arguably as safe as the environment was 30, 40 years ago, where children could freely walk to school. Why is the question? Why would that be the case? And what can we do about this? Well, what you can do about it, the Bandido is a self-confessed selfish git. A self-confessed selfish git. What do I mean by that? Well, if I have a problem with something in my life, I'm always thinking, how can I help out number one? Who is number one? In this case, number one is the Bandido. So if I have a problem, or if the people who I care about are affected by some problem that also affects me, and I want to do something about it. So let's say in this example, let's say I had kids, and let's say, for whatever reason, I have determined that the environment in which I'm living, the town in which I'm living, the city in which I'm living, I'm not happy with the overall safety of the area in which I'm living. Let's say for whatever reason, the area in which I'm living has become unsafe. Let's say there's more crime on the rise. There's more risk to my child. So in this hypothetical area in which the Bandido lives with his family, let's say his 3 children, who are all of the age where they can walk to school. In this hypothetical area where crime is just on the rise, and I feel as if my children are at risk if I send them out to school. And let's say I'm working very hard, and because of the current economic climate, with all the inflation, the devaluing of our currency, and the prices of everything, and the fact that our wages aren't necessarily going up in tandem with the inflation. Let's say I'm being pinched economically, but that I'm unhappy with the overall security and safety of the area in which I live and in which my family lives. What would I do? What would the Bandido do? Well, in that case, if I'm unhappy about the safety of my children walking to school or just generally out playing in the area, do you know what I would do? Move to somewhere that is safer or more secure. Now, somebody may say, oh, but I can't do that because I'm in a difficult financial situation and I can't do it. I don't have the means to move somewhere. I'm stuck here. Well, this is the lesson, folks. This is why we have Bandido Talks. We want to try and avoid getting into situations where we are physically tied to a location. And that's really the deeper lesson here. You don't want to be tied to a physical location, because if something happens in that location, let's say the hypothetical location where I'm living with my 3 kids, let's say in that hypothetical location, crime starts to increase. I want to have the ability to be able to move somewhere where crime is not on the rise, where it's not ascending, and where my kids are not at risk. Now, if somebody's already in a situation whereby they are feeling the pinch financially, but they're not happy with the environment in which they're living or their kids are living, or their kids are having to go out and play in, or this idea we're talking about here of kids having to walk to school. They're just not happy with the overall physical safety of the area. But let's say that person is feeling the pinch, the economic pinch of the times in which we're living in. Well then, what I would suggest, I think a logical thing to suggest, if you can't do it right now, then you start making plans for how you would do it. Because if that issue is a big enough issue to you, if you feel strongly enough about your kids' physical safety, if you're seeing that the degraded nature of the area in which you are living is leading to an increase in crime, and you're unhappy with the safety of the area, then we need to start planning. We need to start figuring out seriously if this is a serious issue. And this is the thing, I hear it both online and in person. I hear people make excuses. Oh, I can't do that because, I have to work here and I have to do that. If this is a big enough issue to you, if the physical safety of your kids in a particular area is a big enough issue to you, you will find a way. You will find a way to make it work. And that may mean subtracting from your desires. So let's say you like to purchase certain items every week. Let's say you like to go out. You like to enjoy a restaurant meal. You like to go out with your friends on a night out. And this all costs moolah. You may need to start subtracting from your desires if you're in a financially compromised situation where it's difficult for you to make the move immediately. If the issue is a big enough deal for you, and this goes for anything, you won't be making excuses. You'll be finding a solution to the problem. And I'm not saying you're going to find the solution easily. I'm not saying that it's going to be easy in general. But there should be a determination to have a serious look inwards Have a look at number 1. Does this mean enough to me? And in this case, where we have, no doubt, families across the UK who maybe feel the need to send their kids on a taxi. Maybe they're living somewhere where it's too far away for the kids to walk, and they need to send them in a taxi. And let's say, because the taxi even costs a lot of money, we need to start finding ways, being responsible, having a look at our own lifestyle, and seeing, can we actually subtract from our own desires in order to obtain our goal? Because if you're in an area where you have questions about the physical safety of your kids and maybe of yourself as well, that is a basic human need. If you're feeling threatened physically, that would be, in my book, if I was feeling threatened physically, that would be a pretty high priority problem to solve. I would want to find a solution to that problem. And it would require me to sit down and have a serious look at my own existence, have a serious look at what it is that I'm doing. Is there a better way in which I could do this? And essentially take it from there. But the last thing we want to do is to grovel in our own self-pity, whine and make excuses. Nobody said it would be easy. There's no question about it. Times are difficult economically, and that's part of the article. Part of the article is things are expensive nowadays. And also, part of the article, I'm making the case that the underlying simmering, I suppose we could say, lesson in this article is that perhaps because our environments, our physical ecology is becoming less safe, we then need to take a serious look at what it is that we're doing. And rather than blame this person or blame this politician, because this is the thing, we read an article like this, we see politicians bickering among one another. This is why I say the Bandido is a self-confessed selfish git. That's why I say this, because reading an article like this, I can start to see what the problem is. The problem is people are, number one, they're feeling the squeeze financially because of our economic climate, and then number two, people are feeling anxious and uneasy about the drop in safety standards of the town or city in which they're living. They feel like it's more unsafe for their kids, hence the need for taxis. But of course, taxis cost money. And if we're feeling the financial strain of the economic climate, we can see the problem. Things are unsafe. I want a taxi, but taxi costs money, and I'm feeling the pinch, and I don't have enough money to keep shelling out on taxis. So this is the thing. I read this, and I see this bickering, this back and forth, classic political stuff. These politicians who probably live in fancy houses in crime-free areas with a consistent income that's probably in the hundreds of thousands, more than likely. A lot of these politicians, especially someone like the Education Secretary, I don't think it's a stretch to say that she's making hundreds of thousands or has made hundreds of thousands. Not a problem for these people. This is why I literally describe myself as a selfish git, because I'm looking out for me. Nobody's going to look out for me more than myself. And so it's up to me not to look to these people, the Education Secretary, this reform local councillor. Instead of me trying to offload my problems to these people and expecting them to do something, I don't have expectations that anybody is going to do anything for me. That's why I look after number one. That's why I'm selfish. I look at my own situation. I don't whine. I don't complain. I do not bitch. I look at it with a cold, calculated analysis and say, okay, how can I do something here to benefit me in this situation? If I were in this situation, what I'm not doing is trying to offload my problems to some education secretary who's in some chamber with a bunch of suits and ties who are on hundreds of thousands, have loads more money than me, don't really know how to relate to the common person, one could argue. Why would I offload and expect my problem to have a solution in the hands of individuals who are like that? The only people who are going to be able to be in the best position to fix our own problems are ourselves. We need to be selfish. We need to look at our situation and say, what can I do? What can I do? Don't offload responsibility. What can I do? Be critical. Don't make excuses. You can accept the reality, or you can try to do something about it. And in this case, if I were in an environment, if I were in a country where I'm feeling the financial strain of the economic climate, and I'm also unhappy about my physical safety, well then, what I will be doing is I will be plotting and scheming from this point forward to figure out a way how I can be in a less financially compromised situation, number one, and then number two, find a way so that I'm not in an environment that I would deem to be unsafe. I wouldn't whine or make excuses. I'll look at my situation critically and see, do I have to subtract from some of my desires to get what I want, to free up some financial headroom? Do I have to essentially eliminate some of the pleasures, the fancy pleasures that I have in my existence? Maybe I do need to do that. Maybe I need to relocate. I have to put in the effort and find another residence somewhere else. Is it awkward? Is it a pain in the arse? Yes, it is. But if the issue means enough to me, I won't be making excuses and I won't be offloading the problem to people like this. These people are not me. They do not understand my situation. And that's not me necessarily having a go at them. It's just reality. They do not understand my situation. So the best thing to do, folks, is be selfish. Look after number one. And don't expect someone else to look after number one who doesn't even know you personally. Do an honest review of your circumstances and see how you can start to plot and scheme your way out of a situation like this. If you're feeling the financial pinch, and if you're in an area that is so degraded or so unsafe, or is becoming so degraded and so unsafe that your kids can't even walk to school. It's time to get to work. That is what I would say. I think that's the lesson from the article. So it seems like this sort of benign article where you've got politicians, the typical thing, bickering back and forth. But lying underneath it, folks, is this idea of taking personal responsibility for your own circumstances, not offloading responsibility, being selfish, looking out for number one. Because no one is going to look out for number one more than you. And nobody understands your circumstances better than you. The solutions lie within. The solutions are not to be found in the exterior. Do not wait for people to hand you on a platter what it is that you are looking. Okay,